I'm your host, Effie Pilarino, and I have the pleasure today to have with us, Dr. Philipp Sandner from the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management and the head of the Blockchain Center there, and I think also the co-founder of the German Blockchain Association. Welcome, Philipp.
Welcome, Effie. Thanks much for asking me to be interviewed. Very nice.
So tell us, I mean, you wear so many hats. I know you very well from your diverse and very deep dive activities in the blockchain space, not now that it's hot in terms of trading and speculating and all that, but from the early days, because obviously you understood that this is a disruptive cross-industry technology, and therefore you're involved, from what I know, to many activities, even at the EU level. So tell us briefly at a high level about the ecosystem that you're involved in, both at the university level, the public, the private sector level in blockchain.
Okay, of course. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm trying to basically push blockchain, especially in Germany. I'm the head of the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center, which is sitting in Frankfurt. That's in the middle of Germany, and I'm trying to basically help with my team and with the university. Push the community, help with education. And education primarily includes not just the students at our university, but also people outside our university, people in companies and organizations, and also on behalf of the state and the government. And here we currently see that the interest from the government and also from companies is strongly increasing month by month. Now we are very often in Germany and also in Brussels at the European Union, trying here and there to help them understand digital identity and the digital programmable euro. That's the euro on a blockchain system. Sometimes also like an exotic topic such as decentralized finance, DeFi. And in former times, say 1 year ago, the topics were different. At that time, people mostly wanted to understand security tokens, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and so on, right? So you see here very interestingly that the topics which are demanded for education are changing very quickly. It's not the case in Germany that much budget is spent on blockchain projects already. This is still something which must happen in the future, but at least interest is there, and decision makers in companies and also at the public government in Berlin or in Brussels are at least really in a good mode of understanding the beauty and also the risks and the challenges of the technology. And then I'm extremely sure that maybe very soon, maybe this year or next year, we will see a next hype coming up, not necessarily with Bitcoin, but also with applications on behalf of the industry.
You gave a great overview, Philipp, and what you said is a great point, that the focus has been shifting, as you said, from ICOs to security tokens, to the digital ID, and now to DeFi. So it's really exciting. And, you know, I was looking at some numbers around DeFi, which is the hottest or the most growing space. And year-end 2019, there were a little bit less than $700 million locked in all DeFi projects. And now we are above 8.5 billion. So that's immense growth. And obviously it's caught the attention of everybody to understand what this is. And I know that you had set up an experimental fund in DeFi. I saw it, I think it was end 2019, right?
Yes, exactly. We try to make it happen in the beginning of this year, such that we can basically measure the performance on a starting with a very specific date. I think we made it January 1st.
And what was it focused on? Because right now, when I look at DeFi, I mean, all the hype is around lending. I think of it, it's the next generation of peer-to-peer lending. Fintech, has grown a huge space in peer-to-peer lending, but that again is centralized, right? It's non-bank, but it is centralized. And DeFi has grown the lending space. I think it's nearly 4 billion, so a little bit less than half whole DeFi, but there's other spaces in DeFi. There's the decentralized exchanges, there's the derivatives, there's the layer 2 payments that are much smaller, around maybe 1 billion or half a billion. I think the payment layer is actually pretty small. It's around 300 million. What were you focused on with your experimental fund? And it would be great if you could share some of the learnings.
Yes, of course. So the idea was to basically explore DeFi from a quite operative perspective, because the more I learn, teach, read, and so on about blockchain, the more I get more into it. I started with 2013, and since 2017, we now started to run the blockchain center at the Frankfurt School at the university. And the more I invest time in it, the more it gets pretty clear to me. You can only learn and understand blockchain if you are able to understand the tech, and even more so, ideally, if you know a little bit of programming. And the core of understanding arises if you are really digging a little bit into the smart contracts. It can be very easy smart contract. It can be a very small escrow smart contract, which might have 10 or 20 lines of codes. But in case you are able to understand this, then it's much easier to tap into blockchain and all this breadth of the technology. And that's exactly our learning here, that we want to get into it by really operatively doing it ourselves, investing a little bit of money to basically see what happens, then write about it, help people educate by doing it, by showing exactly what we have done, in comparison to simply reporting what others have been doing. I hope you get the point. There is a difference.
I understand. Okay. It's not about telling the world that, we allocated XYZ, this is our portfolio, and this is our performance, and maybe you want to follow, but it's all about the learnings through really the getting involved and doing the operational stuff and
exactly.
Understanding the risks.
Exactly.
And it is there. I mean, I honestly have not done that exercise of allocating a small amount and getting involved. And what I find challenging is I can think theoretically through the risks that a DeFi and on the lending part may have, but I think there are more risks hidden that one can only understand if you really actually do the trades. So
exactly. So if you have understood everything perfectly, everybody knows you. But I primarily mean people who want to now enter this industry, and this industry is developing at a dramatic high speed. In case new people, be it students or people working at companies, if they would like to enter this blockchain, DeFi, and crypto ecosystem working at this extreme speed, they need to find the right ways to enter. And I feel that it's that the learning is higher when you operatively do things. Basically, that's learning by doing, with some kind of just do it mentality. You just have to do it, and then it eases understanding and it speeds things up. Of course, understanding is also possible without programming and developing, but I just want to highlight that it's speeding up things, and that's exactly what we did. So we said we took 1,000 euro at that time, January 1st, and investing it in 10 selected DeFi protocols from various types. So we didn't have a clear strategy. We just wanted to invest it in a multiple strategy and see basically what happens. We expected that probably some of these projects might get into trouble, so there might be a loss. And other protocols, in this case, for example, Synthetics and others, should or potentially could develop quite nice. And now, after observing this for a couple of months, we have been quite lucky. we didn't invest a large amount of money, but it's always the same. In case you just invest 10 euro, 100 euro or 1,000 euro, then you are at least exposed a little bit. And then you are just, thrilled a little bit whether it works, what you had in mind or not. And in our case now, it worked quite well. Most of these 10 protocols developed quite nicely. Others didn't. But I just have to mention, this is not really a fund. It's just for educational purposes for us, for others, such that we are able to describe what's happening here. Everybody can observe the portfolio. It's all on the public ledger. And it helped us understand what's going on here. And we hope that the people who have read this small article presenting this DeFi educational fund, that it also helped them a little bit. Yeah, but the word fund is the wrong word.
Yeah, I understand. And when you say it's on the public ledger, I mean, I'm familiar with your Medium blog where you had described it. Can one find it on the GitHub, or when you talk about the ledger, what do you mean?
Well, honestly, it's extremely simple. We just took these 1,000 euros, split it in 10 tranches, and then basically invested it into 10 different protocols. So you can see basically where the money come from which original wallet, and how it then went into these 10 protocols. So you do not need to install any code. GitHub, we could have done it, but we didn't have been developing it in this sophisticated way. What I mean with public ledger is that you just can inspect the flow of the money on the Ethereum ledger, for example, on websites such as Etherscan.
So it's basically a passive strategy, right? Whatever you put in, buy and hold, and that's it.
Exactly. And Efi, there's one very interesting point here which we learned, because actually at the end of the day, if you are trying to describe what we have been doing on a higher level, we indeed basically propose a new strategy on how to run a fund. A fund could namely be a smart contract in the future. That's exactly what Melonport and others are doing. And this then leads to the way that in the future, you might not need any fund managers at all. You might be people who are guiding strategies and developing algorithms, but this huge industry where are many people employed, running funds, especially active funds, in my personal opinion, this industry will strongly diminish or will become much smaller in 5 to 10 years, because funds will be simply ran with a smart contract, investing money in other issued tokens, for example. This can be now seen and could now easily also be shown. And you can now extrapolate what this could do in the next 5 to 10 years.
It's interesting that you said, Philip, you said that this could be a disruptor for active funds, but I would think that since the biggest part of the industry is actually passive funds, whether they're ETFs or mutual funds, they're index trackers, I would think that those would be replaced first, both from the clearing and settlement and administrative perspective, but also, the rebalancing, and it would be at a much lower cost with much lower risks and so on.
You're absolutely right. Maybe I didn't express it very clearly. The passive management of funds will be extremely slim and be entirely ran by software code. So there will probably only be a legal entity, maybe an auditor, maybe a lawyer, something like this, running the passive fund, and not much more. And the active fund management will also change dramatically because, of course, you might need a manager investing here and there. But this manager, we know it from the past decades of statistics, these managers really have to prove that they are able to excel the market, because these people cost money. So in my mind, the active fund management part will also be affected, but not directly, more indirectly, because passive management strategies will be broader, will direct money in much more asset classes than we know right now, much more fine-grained in assets such as, say, car leasing instruments and other things which will come to us. And therefore, it will be much more tougher for active managers to really guarantee or kind of show that they are excelling the market.
So do you believe, Philip, that blockchain as an infrastructure in these processes that are typical in the financial markets and very complex, that is where the big impact is going to be, instead of where we're focused right now on these, you know, speculative utility tokens or hybrid tokens and creating protocols? What
That's
is
an
your
excellent
feeling?
question. My feeling is that basically what we see with the decentralized finance movement or architecture, which is basically smart contracts which are plugged together to fulfill all kinds of financial services. And I feel that we see here the emergence of a new type of capital market, which is having all kinds of function needed. You have loans there, exchanges there, liquidity providers there, all kinds of things you mentioned previously. And we see that this kind of financial market actually works by smart contracts plugged together. Of course, in comparison to traditional capital markets, these 8 billion, which you mentioned, is not too high. But still, given the growth, it's tremendous what's happening here, because you can see very in real life how the new type of the capital market will develop. Of course, there are hiccups, there is fraud happening, there are sometimes money lost in smart contracts which have not been audited, sometimes money is stolen. This is all not nice, but still we are seeing experiments going on. It's like the R&D unit, research and development going on for the capital market. It will grow, it will mature. On the go, security will be improved, auditing will be improved, best practices for development will be existing, and so on. And at some point of time, decentralized finance, in my personal opinion, will become the next generation capital market. With one big question, at this point of time, it's all decentralized. And that's exactly why it can grow without any regulatory inspection or without any regulatory action so far. But there is a risk, of course, that countries and their regulatory bodies are trying to close it down. Some of them they can close down, other parts they cannot close down, or alternatively, they at some point of time have to regulate it. And then the question is, how will they regulate it? Yeah, will they regulate me as an investor, me as an issuer, such that I'm allowed to do specific things and I'm prohibited to not do specific things, right? That's one likelihood. Another possibility would be that they are closing down crucial parts of the system. That could be the Tether stablecoin or the USD dollar stablecoin. But then you know how it is. Then money is basically driven out to decentral stablecoins such as MakerDAO, but MakerDAO is also having a centralized component, and so on and so on. So it will be like
a struggle to see where the balance is going to be found. But
yes, exactly.
It is clear definitely that the regulation can determine the trends and what is going to dominate in terms of technology. The other component that I believe can also shape what's going to happen is the tax system. You know, if you tax transactions on smart contracts, or, you know, the way you're going to tax them, and that is also for cryptocurrencies. This can affect the adoption and you know, the rate at which it spreads. So regulation, which of course is related to taxation, can also affect you know, the direction.
Absolutely. So one point on this, actually you can see very nicely how extremely creative and innovative an ecosystem on a worldwide level can be when regulation is entirely absent. So you do not have regulators interfering with DeFi at this point of time because it's too small and too speedy. And you see what happens. It's like a craze going on, but it's positive and negative because it's extremely innovative what's going on, right? But we have to have some regulation because already now you see many people operating in a fraudulent way, people stealing money and so on. And regulation could prevent this in the future when it becomes larger. And right now you have tech guys in the DeFi sector, right? if all these people would like the DeFi sector to grow, then adoption has to take place also with people who are not that tech savvy and who are not all developers. And if you would like these people who are not developers, if you would like these guys to also invest money in DeFi, then they need to trust the system. And they cannot read the programming code because they might not be computer scientists. So you have to basically create this potential trust, probably through some regulatory measures, because then these people would have trust to also invest their money, even though they do not understand the smart contract which is committed to the chain, right? Therefore, at some point of time, if people want to have it grow, be it DeFi, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other solutions, if they want to really see it grow, then at sometimes you have to put it on a good fundament, and then you have to have some regulatory measures to create a trust such that these people can invest. I think this is an important point. But let me now also highlight a very interesting example. I have really digged into one project where they issued a utility token, that's basically what it is, such that you can consume a specific service when you are owning the token, right? So it's a utility coin, a utility token. You can consume something in case you are owning this token. In our real world, that's nothing else than a voucher. And if you, Avi, or I, Philipp, if we are purchasing a voucher, then we have to pay value-added tax to the government. And who is basically receiving the tax? I'm paying money for the voucher. The person who is issuing the voucher is getting the money, and he's basically taking the value-added tax and sending it to the government. That's how the system works. But now, in case this utility token, in form of a voucher, in case this utility token is issued in a decentralized way, then there is no issuer anymore. So there is no entity who would basically take the VIT, the value-added tax, collect it and send it to the government. Why? Because there is no issuer. And this is interesting because now people can simply list all kinds of tokens on decentralized markets. That's similarly like the ICO wave a couple of years ago. And in case this is purely decentral, then there is no issuer, then you cannot have a value-added tax, even though you might should. There is no issuer who would collect the tax. There is nobody on behalf of the government whom this tax liability should be addressed to. So whom should the government ask to say, please, you collect the taxes and forward it to me? There is nobody out there because it's purely decentral. And this, as you said, Efi, creates huge questions out there about how these markets should run in the future. And what happens if much more money is running on these systems, because then, of course, governments, regulation, tax offices around the world will have some issues with them because money is moved from A to B and it's not taxed because there is no issuer, nobody to address, right, and so on. That's exactly why so many DeFi protocols are thinking currently how to really get decentralized to be issuerless.
It's very interesting what you said, because it also opens up a completely new market where one could offer services through a utility token, whether they're fungible or non-fungible, and it's not only avoid taxes, but basically monetize in a way that was not practical and economical before.
Yes, exactly. And there are so many unanswered questions that it's also very complex to think through all of this, because you also don't know, do we want to have it or do we not want to have it? That's really unclear, and it's going so speedy that you can't really sit down and discuss and make up your thoughts on this. But you just said what happens if somebody sells his services through a utility token. The question is, can he do so? Because if there is a person, providing its services, then this person might be the issuer indirectly and then is tax liable, right? So you never know what happens. It's extremely complex. And that's exactly why at this point of time, my feeling is that DeFi financial instruments that do work are those that are most decentralized as possible. Yeah, that's loan smart contracts, decentralized exchanges, and so on. But as soon as you are starting to introduce a centralized element, then you're running into all these problems with regulation, tax authorities potentially, liability risks, and so on. That's why we not yet see many off-chain assets, because any off-chain asset would introduce a centralized element to DeFi. With one exception, by the way, or a couple of exceptions. You see Chainlink, which is basically relying on partly centralized market data, but then turning it around and making this data basically decentralized. It's an interesting mode of decentralizing centralized market data, if I can say this way. And another example is Aave or Aave, or however you spell it, A-A-V-E, Aave, that's the right spelling, right? Yeah. You know, nowadays we are just sitting on our computer with Corona and writing. We are not talking to each other anymore. Therefore, sometimes I forgot how to pronounce it. Okay, let's call it Aave. And in this case, Aave is fascinating because they now started to introduce mortgage loans into their system. And this is something I will investigate next, because somehow they are now bridging the area from decentralized loans on the one hand side to centralized mortgage loans on the other hand side. I really need to investigate how this works and how they manage this centralized element, which potentially might to create regulatory risks.
So Philipp, I think, you know, we could be talking about a lot of topics because, as you very well pointed out, we have here innovation, technological innovation, we have business processes innovation, we have, you know, pushing to the limit the concepts, the legal concepts, and most importantly, the governance concepts, because at the end of the day, this is the big disruption, right? At the core, it's a disruption of governance. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And with Bitcoin, for whatever reason, there has been a quite nicely balanced governance mechanism found between the developers, the community, the miners, the people investing, and so on. So that's interesting to see how that this basically has developed very nicely. Ethereum also. Now we see the move towards proof of stake coins, which creates huge governance issues. Exactly, and that's exactly why it also takes a little bit long, because you really have to think through all kinds of cases and edge cases, what happens when, because indeed governance is being made decentral, right? And I know it from companies here in Germany where also large-scale industrial companies wanted to come together and run a joint DLT network together for doing business, for identifying things, and so on. And at the end of the day, they basically stopped creating their consortium after more than 1 year because they could not find a governance option, which is basically there where everybody's happy with. Yeah, so each person had their own interests and they could not reconcile their interests, and that's why this kind of consortium at the end of the day broke up because there was no governance mechanism found. Yeah, that's interesting because you always then have the tendency to say we need one people top down controlling this and that, and then you have another person saying no, I cannot accept this, we have to be all balanced. And if then everybody is balanced and equal, then the question is how to find consensus, right? That's exactly right. Governance and so on are the most crucial issues out there, which are all strongly under research. But luckily, we have DeFi, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and all kinds of other projects which have simply put governance issues to real life, such that we can observe them.
I mean, and this obviously resonates with all the social issues that we are facing globally, which of course could have been resolved if there was a way to sit around the table and put in a hierarchy as to what is the priority and arrive at a consensus to solve the most important problems. And of course, we can't do it because we lack a fair and socially equitable governance mechanism. And I think, to me, this is the biggest value of these technological innovations, that they push also our social philosophical thinking to change the ways that have created problems. Without being political, I think that, you know, all these issues of trust, lack of trust, the fake news, governance, cross-border issues, silos, they all relate to what DeFi is trying to replace, so to speak. I hope I don't sound too rebel, but I think this is the core of what is going on.
No, I agree with decentral networks out there. We have now created basically unstoppable machines and an unstoppable capital market. The established traditional capital markets and financial markets, they will try to here and there interfere, try to put it into their direction and so on. Of course, this will happen. This is done probably by regulation, and this also has something good, because then trust is created such that people who are not having the technical skills can trust and potentially invest in this, right? So it will be required at some point of time. But you also have to see, Efi, that there is this very tiny but very dynamic DeFi market at 8 plus minus billion. And then you have the traditional capital markets running with dozens or hundreds of trillions of US dollar, right? And therefore, there is still a very, very long way to go from this tiny DeFi ecosystem to a more widely accepted capital market. So this will take some years probably, but still, in my personal opinion, it's brilliant, it's creative, it's innovative, it's unstoppable, it's more efficient, it's more inclusive. But of course, it has to be, in my mind, regulated here and there.
Great. So we have a lot to look forward to over the next decade, because this is the kind of time frame and journey that one should expect for this type of disruptive framework, protocols, apps, dApps, and so on. And on that note, Philipp, I'd like to thank you very much for being with us today. If you want to say something as a last note about the activities of the Blockchain Center, your activities, please, you're welcome.
Yeah, that's nice. Thanks for having me here, Efi. It was a pleasure. So what are we doing at the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center? We are, as an academic institution, trying to help the community grow in Germany mainly. But we are also having like a half foot in the Swiss market, knowing the key people there, also trying to be in contact with the key startups from Switzerland and so on. And besides this, we are also running a couple of interesting projects, partly also talks, interviews, discussion rounds with officials from banks and also governments to really help them understand topics such as decentralized identities and so on. So that's all very fascinating. And I really try to encourage also students at our university and all other people out there working at banks or being students or whoever to really get interested in the topic of blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, DeFi, digital securities, and so on, because it will be a tremendous evolvement and partly also disruption, what we will be able to experience in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe also in the next 2 to 5 years. There will be so many things being like triggered by blockchain. There will also be huge potential for doing an amazing career as a young student right now and so on. So I'm really trying to encourage people to spend more money in terms of investment. That's basically regarding the investors and also the companies, but I'm also trying to trigger people investing more time into this entire ecosystem, because then at some point of time understanding is being deepened.
Yeah, so human resources and financial resources need to be allocated in this direction, because there is a lot of upside to this. It is clear. Again, Philipp, thank you so much.
Thank you.